JC, it is time to make our picks for playoffs in the CFL. We've got the East semifinal, we've got the West semifinal. Before we get into the lines and the odds in our picks, which of these two games are you more excited for?
I think it's tough. If you asked me this question just a few weeks ago, you'd say they'd both be stinkers based on the way a couple of these teams were playing, but looks like everyone's on the right track right now. A bunch of things that weren't going right for a couple of franchises are now going right once again, and they both look like very exciting matchups. I will have to go with a bit of a homer pick and say it's the West semifinal for me. I think that's a really compelling matchup, and there's a lot more to be decided and determined out west, in my opinion, than in the East Division. But I think both of these games have the potential to be very exciting.
Indeed. I mean, the last time that Toronto and Ottawa played, the Red Blacks put up 25 points in the fourth quarter, got two onside kickoff recoveries, and the time they met before that, Chad Kelly and Drew Brown combined for close to, I think it was 850, if not 900 yards passing. So I'm more excited for the West Division, being more of a West guy myself. However, the East game is right there, and you make an excellent point, JC. A few weeks ago, these two games did not look enticing at all. Now they are both very enticing, and I'm sure will both draw large audiences on television and otherwise. Against the spread, I gotta say, I felt a little bit ripped off with the Edmonton Elks kicking the game-winning Rouge in overtime because I had Edmonton minus 1.5, and that was to go 10 straight games against the spread. I was robbed of that. They won by one game, but hopefully we'll rekindle the good times here, JC, with our picks against the spread. Starting with the Toronto Argonauts are 6.5-point home favorites when they host the Ottawa Redblacks in the East semifinal on Saturday afternoon. The Redblacks have gotten some reinforcements back in the lineup, including Justin Hardy at slotback and Bennett Williams at strong side linebacker, though Dino Boyd remains out at left tackle, giving Jacob Ruby the start. The Argonauts, meanwhile, could be without star receiver DeMonte Coxie as he's a game-time decision, while Ryan Hunter has moved back to left tackle and Robbie Smith has re-entered the lineup at defensive end. These two teams met twice during the regular season, splitting the matchups one apiece. Ottawa won 42-27 in the first meeting as Chad Kelly threw 4 interceptions at BMO Field, while Toronto won at TD Place Stadium despite allowing 25 points in the fourth quarter. This matchup will be the first playoff game between Ottawa and Toronto since 1990. JC, which team do you see advancing to next week's East Final in Montreal?
Well, as we mentioned off the top, this is a game that just a few weeks ago was not compelling at all. The Ottawa Redblacks were in the dumpster. They didn't have a healthy body anywhere on their roster, and they were struggling as a result. But they seem to have turned it around starting in the fourth quarter of what looked like it was going to be a blowout loss to these very same Argos. Those unlikely 25 points, the 2 onside kicks, that sparked them with over 400 yards from Drew Brown. He backed it up the next week with over 400 yards in a victory, and now they are playing at a very high level with excellent play from the quarterback position and healthy bodies other places on the field. I think that makes this much more interesting. But the Toronto Argonauts are just a better team. I think they've got a better running game, and I think ultimately Chad Kelly is a better quarterback. And there's going to be all sorts of question marks about how he's going to respond in this game. His first playoff performance since what happened last year in the East Final, which, as we all know, was about as bad as a quarterback can play in a postseason game. I think it also matters that this comes against a team that picked him off 4 times earlier this season in a game that a lot of people compared to that East Final performance. But the one thing about Chad Kelly, love him or hate him, everybody's got an opinion. Every time since coming back from suspension that he has faced a serious question or there have been doubts about how he's going to respond emotionally to something, he has answered that positively with one of his stronger performances. He has looked more poised this year than I think he even has in the past. And I think this continues in this playoff game. I've got the Argos winning this one. Although the 6.5-point spread scares me a little bit, I think this Red Blacks team is better than that at this point.
Let's start with a super quick minor correction. The first win, the Ottawa win did take place at TD Place Stadium in Ottawa. The Argonauts also won at home at BMO Field. I got those mixed up in my lead in here. But getting to the game, here's your reasons for optimism if you're Ottawa. The offensive line held up well this past week in the season finale against Hamilton with Jacob Ruby at left tackle. Another reason for optimism, Drew Brown has looked like a stud since coming back from injury. He is doing a great job moving his feet, throwing on the run, throwing accurately, making good decisions, and getting Justin Hardy back can't be understated because he is their best receiver. He has had a very nice season this year, finishing second in receiving league wide despite missing some time. And then defensively, you've got your bookends back. Lorenzo Malden, I thought, was great in the season finale against the Tiger Cats a week ago. You've got Bryce Carter healthy. He's missed time as well. And then Bennett Williams, I think, though he's still not a Darius Pickett, nobody is at strong side linebacker, I think has come on well. You're getting some takeaways, some turnovers. Damon Webb, I thought, was an absolutely fantastic player this season, very deserving of his East Division All-CFL selection. Those are all the pluses. The negatives, however, for me, they can't run the ball, right? And I don't think that Braylon Addison, a career receiver who is actually a high school quarterback, believe it or not, he's now done the trifecta, moving all the way around different parts of the offense, is the guy to sling the rock for you at this point of the year from the backfield. If you're one-dimensional, that is a problem because the Toronto Argonauts front defensively is the best in the CFL, in my opinion. Robbie Smith coming back for them, I think, is big. And then, of course, you've also got the added challenge of this game being in Toronto. Yes, the Argonauts have the lowest attendance of any team in the CFL, but guess what? BMO Field can get rocking when fans show up. They had 20,000 fans there for the season finale. And as someone who has been to games in that building, it gets very loud. Yes, the fans are not huge in number, but they are very mighty in spirit. That will, I think, be a meaningful home field advantage for the Argonauts. So, like you, JC, I think this is going to be a close game. I don't like that this line has gone up. Originally, it was smaller this week. It's almost a touchdown now. I like the Redblacks to cover, but I do see the Toronto Argonauts advancing to the East Final against Montreal. I think they are more battle-tested. I think they are more veteran-laden. I think they've got the better offensive line at this point. I think they've got the better defensive front at this point. DeMonte Coxie being out scares me a little bit, but that's kind of been the secret of this Toronto Argonauts offense all season long, whether it's Mackay Polk, whether it's Dave Unger III, right? They've found ways to spread the ball around. There is no kind of feature guy. I mean, Dejon Brissett just went off for a huge game recently. So I think that will be successful for them. And then you can't overlook Kadeem Carey. Kadeem Carey, I feel like, has been on a pitch count all year. Come playoff time, there's no more reason to keep him on a pitch count. If he's running the ball well early, you keep feeding him. And there's a reason why he was the all-star pick out of the East Division. He is sensational. So I like the Argos to take this one.
I think you make a very salient point when it comes to the line of scrimmage because this game, like most, is going to be won and lost at the line of scrimmage in the trenches by the big boys up front. And you give the Argos the edge there. Now, I don't think it's a landslide edge because the Ottawa Redblacks have a pretty good defensive line of their own. Bryce Carter and Lorenzo Malden, who you both mentioned. I think you could argue those are the two best defensive ends not named Falarin or Malati in the CFL right now. Willie Jefferson, with all due respect to the vet. But on the offensive side of the ball, it's advantage Argos all the way. Even with Ryan Hunter out of position at left tackle, he's looked extremely good there. And Dejon Allen at right, coming back from injury at right tackle, is a huge boost for them. More importantly, that offensive line's going to get a chance to get a breather by running the football. They've got Carey, who we know how good he's been this season, but Deontay McMahon and Daniel Agabomboye can both run the rock as well, and they'll rotate those guys and let the Hoggies go to work up front, pushing the pile, give them a breather from all that pass protection. I don't think Braylon Addison's going to do that for the Ottawa Redblacks. That puts a lot more pressure on that Ottawa offensive line against what is the most complete defensive front in the CFL. I would say even the most complete front seven in the CFL.
Should be a good one, folks. Make sure you're tuning in. I can't wait. I'm excited. The Saskatchewan Roughriders are 3.5-point home favorites over the BC Lions on Saturday for the West semifinal. BC will have Javon Katoy back in the starting lineup at slot back after he missed the final 3 games of the regular season due to an ankle injury, while Vernon Adams Jr. will start under center after showing out in the team's regular season finale. Saskatchewan, meanwhile, will have Reichwell Armstead back as he and AJ Ouellette share duties in the backfield, while Adam Auclair will return at weak side linebacker. These teams split their 2 regular season meetings, with the home side capturing both games, though Trevor Harris wasn't available for Saskatchewan's loss, and Vernon Adams Jr. was on the bench for BC's loss. This means that both franchise quarterbacks will face off against each other for the first time this year. That's exciting. Which team, JC, will advance to the West Final against Winnipeg?
There's a lot to like about Saskatchewan in this matchup, particularly playing at home at Mosaic Stadium, I think is a critical factor for them. But also, Trevor Harris, through the second half of the season since he's returned from injury, has been as good, if not better, than any quarterback in the CFL. And the ways that he excels in getting the ball out of his hands and being highly efficient also happen to be the weaknesses of the BC Lions defense, who allow the most passer efficiency in the CFL, the highest completion percentage. They'll let you beat them underneath and march the field because they don't have the ability to take it away right now. They've been focusing on turnovers. They're going to need those to pull the upset in this game. But right now, it's advantage Trevor Harris in that category. With all that said, I sat here a couple weeks ago before BC's game against Calgary and said that would be the last game that they would win all season because I had zero trust in this football team. I compared them to a dying animal at various points, made myself a lot of friends in the organization along the way, Mr. Hodge. But that was before I saw Vernon Adams Jr. come back under center. I think I was a little naive about how much of an effect that would have. Surely these guys must be playing the same way for Nathan Rourke as they would for VA. That clearly was not true because they responded in a huge way in that last regular season game. And I think this team is dramatically different with him under center than they were prior to that. And let's not forget, yes, Saskatchewan didn't have Harris in their first game of the season, but the Lions won that game convincingly with Vernon Adams Jr. throwing for well over 400 yards in that performance. He was electric. I think he can do the same thing again against a very good Saskatchewan defense. And with that motivation of playing for VA, as well as the added motivation of, I think this is a coaching staff that knows they need to win this game in order to guarantee their jobs going forward, I think the Lions can pull a sneaky upset against a Saskatchewan team that might get caught looking ahead.
Wow, taking the upset here and the points, of course, with the Lions. Interesting, JC. Very interesting. For me, I am rolling with the home side here. I do think it is going to be a close game for sure. The thing that I like about Saskatchewan, we'll start here. Obviously, the play of Trevor Harris. I mean, both quarterbacks, this would have been sensational. These two quarterbacks, by the way, when you do voting for All-Stars, or as they're called now, all CFL teams, you get 2 picks at some of these positions, a first choice and a second choice. These 2 quarterbacks were the 2 quarterbacks in the West who got my votes for that. I think they're both sensational, especially at this point of the season. I love how Trevor Harris takes pressure off of this offensive line in Saskatchewan. Rookie left tackle Trevor Reed has been solid all year, but across the board, I'm not sure this is the best pass blocking offensive line in the CFL. But Trevor Harris gets the ball out so quickly. He takes a lot of the pressure off that. I'm excited to see Reichwell Armstead and AJ Ouellette in this game. Knowing Mark Mueller and the way he's able to game plan, I'd love to see them on the field at the same time. Even now, should be noted the BC Lions tied for first in the CFL this season with only 4.7 yards allowed per rush. That is tied with the Redblacks for number 1 in the CFL. So it'll be interesting to see if the Lions, despite some of the injuries they've had in their linebacking core, are able to handle that. But even if the Lions are able to take away the run game for a Prairie game, this is supposed to be, looking at the forecast, a good weather day in Regina. They've got a ton of weapons, obviously. The Canadians Keyshawn Johnson, who's been a sensational player for Saskatchewan this year, to dice up what I think has been a questionable at best secondary in BC this year. Then defensively, the Riders have got Malik Carney back. Micah Johnson has had a renaissance season. This defensive line has been good enough that this team is going into the playoffs with Anthony Lanier as a healthy scratch, a guy who was arguably the best defensive player in the CFL as recently as 2022. And then, of course, this defense led by Roland Milligan on the back end has done an incredible job of forcing takeaways. And that, to me, will be the story of this one. Can Vernon Adams Jr. avoid those takeaways? I think we all know Vernon Adams Jr. is going to throw for a touchdown or two. The question is he also going to give it away a couple of times? Because he threw 2 interceptions in the regular season finale, not necessarily both being his fault. One of them was very much on his receiver, but still, the Saskatchewan Roughriders this season, that has been their MO. They will eat you alive with turnovers. There's no margin for error there. They were unbelievably good at taking the ball away this season, plus 26 in the turnover ratio. The next best team was Montreal at plus 10. That is a wild advantage they've had. BC will have to protect the ball, and Vernon Adams Jr. will be the one who has to do it if they are to win this game.
I think the one element that doesn't get enough love going into this game or enough attention going into this game is everyone dismisses the Lions' ability to run the football because they haven't had it in the past, and they've particularly gone away from it in playoff games. But that's been a point of emphasis this year. And do not forget, William Stanback is the second leading rusher in the CFL behind Brady Oliveira. Even if it gets a little chilly come playoff time, I think the Lions have the ability to establish some of the run. They've changed their defense so they can stop the run, as you already mentioned, Hodge. I think Stanback could potentially have a bigger impact in this football game than both Raquel Armstead and AJ Ouellette for Saskatchewan. Frankly, Ouellette's been a little bit disappointing this year as he's battled injury. Armstead had that 200-yard game after coming over from Ottawa, but then got hurt. I think Stanback has been a far more consistent player, and if they need to, the Lions can settle down VA by handing the ball off to his buddy Will in the backfield and getting the hard yards.
It'll be a great game, JC, and you make an excellent point. Let's remember, BC has certainly changed their lineup from previous seasons, specifically to try to be geared more towards playoff football. And with the road to the Grey Cup, which, yes, is in Vancouver, however, running through the prairies in Regina and Winnipeg, we'll certainly get a chance to see if they were successful in doing that. Those are our picks for this week in the CFL playoffs. I've got Toronto to win, Ottawa to cover. I'm also taking Saskatchewan to win. I think I am going to take BC to cover for the record at 3.5 points. If that line is under a field goal, I'm all on the Riders to cover, but I do think it is a field goal, 3-point type game. JC is taking the points with BC, not only to cover, but also to win, and he is with me on the East semifinal, taking Toronto to win, Ottawa to cover. Enjoy the games, folks. This will be a good one. Have fun.